Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor, editor-in-chief at Foreign Policy Ravi Agrawal, editorial board chair and editor-at-large for the Financial Times Gillian Tett, and diplomatic correspondent for the New York Times Michael Crowley. Yamiche, I will begin with you. Talk to me about what we saw so far between Keir Starmer and President Trump. They were in the Oval Office meeting, and reporters got to ask quite a few questions.
Well, it's really interesting because the setting of this meeting was that Keir Starmer was not as close of an ally personally to President Trump as, say, French President Emmanuel Macron, who visited earlier this week. Keir Starmer had said that he does not agree with President Trump, who called President Zelensky, of course, the president of Ukraine, a dictator. That being said, in this Oval Office, they were sort of presenting a united front. And Keir Starmer in particular said he was giving credit to President Trump for moving along these peace talks. So there was this real sense that they were together trying to get a sense of sort of how to end this war in Ukraine and how to stop Russia from invading more parts of Ukraine. That being said, you saw in Keir Starmer someone who was also trying to make the case that Europe should be at the table, and also trying to make the case that they have been trying to make their own guarantees, upping not only their national defense spending, but also their economic ties to the United States. So definitely an interesting, a real move there by Keir Starmer to sort of leave the frosty relationship to the side and to try to really, I think, in some ways, cozy up to President Trump. Of course, the U.S. and the U.K. have been longtime allies for a long time. So it really, in some ways, was striking.
Yeah, Michael, we definitely saw that in the Oval Office meeting. The hand delivering of that and the big ceremony that he tried to put around the delivering of the letter from the king and the invitation. This is the message has gotten to European allies that they believe the best way to get Donald Trump on their side is just to shower him with flattery to make him feel important.
Absolutely, Katie. This is the name of the game. And, you know, I think a lot of these leaders, there's no doubt they have real distaste for Donald Trump or worse. But I think they learned over his first term, sometimes the hard way, that, you know, trying to challenge him, trying to one-up him, insult him, prove him wrong just doesn't work. And so people are just resigned to basically kissing the ring. And, you know, it's the old saying, flattery will get you everywhere. And I think people understand that, or I think that the game that a lot of people are playing is that you play to Trump's vanity and you hope that the image and the kind of theatrics get you what you want substantively. So say and do what you have to in front of the cameras. Say how great he is, kind of play along with his photo op moments, and try to get what you can behind the scenes based on whatever goodwill you can earn doing that.
The posture toward Europe has changed so dramatically. It's hard to know where to start with questions. Gillian, it's not just that Donald Trump is trying to, you know, claim that Vladimir Zelensky is a dictator or that, you know, the Ukrainians started the war. It's not just that he's cozying up again with Russia, which anybody could have predicted. It's the way that he's talking about European allies. The rhetoric has gotten sharper, coarser. This idea that he believes the EU and our friends have taken advantage of us, he uses much coarser language than that. And also the implication of these tariffs that he wants to levy against the EU. It's not just talk to say that the United States suddenly feels much more like a foe than a friend.
Absolutely. I'm sitting here in London right now, and there is a growing realization here that the post-war geopolitical order is basically dead. And Britain and the rest of the European Union and the European allies are going to have to find a new type of path going forward. And for Keir Starmer, this is a really important visit because he's had a very tough few months. He, on the one hand, desperately needs to show the British public that he can actually do business with Donald Trump and actually strike some kind of deal, because, of course, there's this long-standing idea that British governments and American governments have this so-called special relationship. But at the same time, anyone who's ever seen the movie Love Actually knows that one thing the British public hates is being bullied by American presidents or lectured by American presidents. And so if Starmer is seen to be essentially giving in any way, he will face a big backlash back home. Starmer hopes he can create a path where he actually acts as a bridge between Europe and the US. That's a hope. The fact that Donald Trump actually met him in person, whereby President Macron was actually met by essentially the head of protocol, is one sign that in some ways they're giving the British a bit more love. But certainly it's going to be very tricky indeed for Starmer to emerge from this without looking as if he's either been too sycophantic or essentially been too aggressive and brushed aside by the president.
What is it going to mean to have a 25% tariff in the UK? The UK, the economy is already struggling there from the move to leave the European Union so many years ago.
Absolutely. It would be brutal. I mean, there is a real sense of stagnation in the British economy right now. And because of the rupture of trading relations with the European Union following Brexit, the UK has really been relying on countries like America for a lot of trade. So a 25% tariff would be very, very painful indeed. Now, the one good bit of news is that most of the trading relationship between the UK and the US is actually around services, not goods. And for the most part, Donald Trump doesn't seem to pay any attention to services, although it's actually pretty important for the UK economy, in fact, very important indeed. So I think one of the other things is the British Prime Minister will be praying that no one mentions services at all, because that's something which is so important for Britain right now.
There was one moment, Ravi. Go ahead, Gillian.
I was going to say Donald Trump is very retro, and he doesn't seem to have noticed that there can be more to economies and factories. And the reality is, in today's global world, services are absolutely critical.
There was one moment, Ravi, in the Oval Office meeting between the two that struck me as uncomfortable. And this was when Donald Trump said to Keir Starmer, could the UK take Russia on by itself? And the Prime Minister just made a face. Of course it can't. It doesn't have an army to do so. No one in Europe has a standalone army to take on Russia. Part of the agreement that the Europeans have had to push back on Russia is to be part of NATO, to have all of the armies together stand up to Russia, and the biggest one, obviously, being the United States.
Of course. And, you know, the only time Article 5 of NATO has ever been invoked, that's the article that says you attack one of us, you attack all of us. That was after 9/11, of course, when European countries and Canada came to America's help when it needed it most. Now, I would just caution, I agree with everything our panelists have said here, but there is a danger to reading too much into the bluster of the TV. I mean, a lot of what we heard in the last couple of hours was theatricality, made for TV moments. And so when Trump says something like, you know, can you take them on your own? I think he's really playing to the cameras, just as, for example, when he was asked if he saw Zelensky as a dictator, he looked at the cameras and said, you know, did I say that? So there's a lot of drama, a lot of theatricality. I think what all of us need to be doing is to look out for the details later when they do emerge, if any deals are struck, and what the give and take has been on either side. I think one thing is clear from the theatricality so far, that Starmer came in very well prepared. It was so clear that Trump was just absolutely pleased as a child with sticky toffee pudding, that he had gotten an invite to go to the UK on a state visit from the King, looking at the signature and sort of marveling at it. That stuff actually works. And so, you know, well played from the UK. The challenge, however, then is behind the scenes, what do they actually get out of it? I'll also just point out the UK has more to lose, in a sense, than many other European countries. Key, A, I mean, the UK is not part of the EU anymore, but B, the Five Eyes Alliance. This is an intelligence network that includes the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And the UK really needs American intelligence to be able to sort of survive in that space, in that arena, especially when you add in how AI and data can sort of crunch so many things. Again, that is an area that Starmer will hope Trump doesn't use as a bargaining chip in any way.
You know, you took the next question right out of my mouth, and it already appears that he's trying to use that as a bargaining chip. There's been, you know, whispers of this against Canada to try and force better, or in his mind, better trade agreements with Canada. Just for our audience benefit, and as obviously we're waiting for the bilateral press conference between the two leaders, Explain Five Eyes and why it is so important, not just for the UK, but all of the member countries, very much including the United States.
Yeah, this is a spy sort of intel sharing network where these 5 countries, Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, that they share all the intelligence gathering they have. And obviously, they do sort of redact some data that they think is absolutely crucial to them. For example, deep sources, stuff like that. But really, they share the bulk of their sort of big data, as it were, intelligence sharing, cooperation, things that allow them to be more than the sum of their parts. And, you know, this data has come in handy. For example, when Canada last year, pointed out to the Indians, for example, that they thought the Indian government was responsible for an assassination plot on one of their citizens on Canadian soil. A lot of that data that emerged came from the American side. So it really is one of those net positive things for all 5 countries. However, as we've learned, it's always the smaller countries that stand more to lose if they're taken out of this kind of a partnership. So it is with NATO, where the smallest countries stand to lose the most. And in a sense, Katie, as we're talking about this new world order that Gillian mentioned, where the old one seems like it's being destroyed or it's ended, that is the thing that all of us are looking out for the most, because in as much as all these world leaders come to the White House and play Trump's transactional game very well in some cases, something else is lost. In a zero-sum world, you have other dangers that emerge, alliances that don't quite work out, and the smallest players that suffer in a world in which there isn't a rising tide that lifts all boats.